Yeah, you can start.
Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. Very good evening to you all. Okay, so firstly, I would like to thank you all for joining with us for this orientation session of Modern Application Development 1, Modern Application Development 2, and System Command courses. I will be introducing myself in a later part of this session. So, in this session, we are gonna discuss that what each course is all about. We will also be introducing the course faculties and the course instructors of each of the courses. So firstly, we will start with the Modern Application Development 1 and Modern Application Development 2 course faculties. So shall I have the next slide, please? Okay. Yeah. So there are two faculties who are basically teaching this course. So the first faculty is Dr. Nitin Chandrachudan. He is a professor at Department of Electrical Engineering in IIT Madras. He has completed his BTech from IIT Madras itself, and he has received his PhD from University of Maryland. And he has been associated with IIT Madras since 2004. The second instructor is Mr. Thejiyen. So he has started his career as software engineer while working with Infosys Technologies Limited. He has also worked as a senior software engineer with NPTL. He was associated with the course builder team. He has been a regular contributor to various open source projects. And he is also a co-founder and chairman of DataMeet Trust, which is a big community of open data science enthusiasts in India. So now for introducing the course instructors for modern application development course, I would like to request others to take over. He will be leading the modern application development 20. So over to you, Adarsh.
Okay, thanks, Abhishek. Yeah, so a warm welcome to everyone joining the session. So this session is basically about giving you an idea of three courses, that is Modern Application Development 1, 2, and System Commands. So I'll be starting off with giving an introduction about things that are happening in Modern Application Development 1. So I'll start off with giving an introduction of the course instructors. So there are three core instructors. That is Adarsh Madre. So that is me. I'm Adarsh Madre, and I've done my MTech from IIT Madras. I've been part of this online BSc program since the first run of application development that we have had in the term September. So apart from me, there is Sonal Sharma, who has done BTech from Kurukshetra University. So Sonal also has been a part of IITM online degree BSc from the first run of application development. We also have Ankur Agrawal with us, who has done his MTech from JH University. He has an experience of around 8 to 10 years in the same field. Apart from the core instructors, we also have supporting instructors, that is Abhishek and Narendra. Next, I'll take you to the course toolkit. So this is all a learner should have while going through the courses or going through the part of application development one. Right. So whenever we talk about developing an app, there are three pillars of web technologies or that are done to create an application from the scratch. Right. So we have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Next comes the programming language that we'll be using for this course, that is Python. So we'll be using Python for creating our business logic all along the course. Next comes the frameworks that we'll be using for creating our application from the scratch, that is Flask, and Bootstrap, which will contribute in giving a particular styling to the application. Next, we'll talk about certain databases. Obviously, when we talk about application, we'll have some data to store within. So to talk about, to give an idea of databases, we'll use SQLite database. Next, when we talk about more crucial concepts like APIs, we need to document APIs. So for that, we'll be using applications like Swagger. And once our application is ready, we'll be working on things like deployment of application. And to provide that platform, we'll use Heroku, or we'll talk about similar platforms like Heroku. So this is about the toolkit of the application development that one needs to have while learning an application or creating an application from the scratch. Next, I'll take you through to the course outline of this coming course. So application development starts off with talking about what an application is at the first place. So when we will, in the first week in the the initial weeks of the course, we'll talk about what is application, various platforms on which application can be built, like web application, mobile application, um, and then there are others. So there can be application that is standalone as well. But then we are choosing web as the platform for our application, right? So we'll talk about various characteristics and how web, why we have come up to a result of using web as a platform for creating the application. Next, we'll come across various network architectures, that is client to server architecture, peer to peer architecture. So these are certain important terminologies that we come across while creating or learning about the basics of application. Next, we'll talk about certain software architecture design or the software design patterns, that is model view controller. So there are many design patterns, software architecture design, which will give us an idea of how an application should be, what are all the components an application should have. But we are using model view controller for the very reason that this has come up as a straightforward answers from many developers right from the primitive part. So this is when the web was created. So over the years, what designers have felt would be a better application or a better design pattern one must follow. So we have come up with that, that is model view controller. Let me give you an idea of what each part of it means. So model, so when we talk about an application, we talk about storing certain data. So where do we store that data? So whenever we talk about storing in an application, we talk about model, right? When we talk about certain presentation of an application, when we talk about how an application look and feel, we'll talk about the view component of MVC design pattern. Now we want a certain backbone that will help us run the entire part of an application, that is help us give the business logic of the application, where the controller comes in, right? So this is how each application is divided into various blocks of model, view, and controller, so that it creates an application in a well structured manner and also gives an application more flexibility and help us in having things like scalability and all in the coming future. Now, as I mentioned before, while talking about the course toolkit, I have mentioned about having CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. And I also mentioned that it is we call them as pillars of any web development when we develop an application from the scratch. So we will, in the first weeks, in the initial weeks of this course, we will talk about things like HTML, CSS, and also Bootstrap. So when we talk about static pages, creating an application from the scratch, we'll talk about HTML, right? So it is a markup language which gives an idea to the web page how it should be. Next comes the styling. When I want to add a certain styling to my application, I'll talk about CSS. Now, if I want to take a step forward into my styling, I would go on to frameworks like Bootstrap, right? As I mentioned before, we'll be using Python as a programming language for this course. So all the controller part that will involve the business logic of the application that we'll be creating throughout, we'll be using Python. And frameworks like Flask are designed in Python so as to have proper combination of application and also the language. Next, as I mentioned about models, we'll talk about certain databases and other alternatives where this data can be stored. So when we talk about databases like structured, unstructured, SQL related databases, no SQL related databases. So when we talk about this, we'll also talk about certain alternatives of structured databases. Now, we'll come to the most important part, or one of the things that one might want in its application are the CRUD operations. So what does CRUD stand for? CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete, right? So from the name, you can see that these are certain operations which one would want in its application. So we'll try to go to the core of each operation in detail when we talk about frameworks like Flask. Next, I'll talk about REST APIs. So before talking about REST APIs, we'll talk about REST as a whole. So REST is a software architectural style which gives certain limitations and constraints which allow an application to be built in a certain manner that it is accepted everywhere, right? So REST gives a certain limitation as to how, or certain constraints as to how an application should be built. Then we'll talk about the APIs. So APIs stand for Application Programming Interface. What is application programming interface in general? So by the name, it suggests that it is something that is creating an interface between two applications. So is that all? No. We can create interfaces between the user as well as the application. But APIs come in handy where we want to share the logic of our application, right? So if I am creating an app and I want certain logic from some certain other apps, I can take the shelter of API, right? We'll talk about APIs in a lot detail and also talk about things like documenting an API, right? So we talked about applications like Swagger, which gives us an idea of how an ideal API or the documentation of APIs are done. Next, we'll talk about front end and back end. So before talking about validation, we'll talk about what front end and back end in general mean. So starting off with front end, as you can see, this gives an idea of what happened at the client machine, what happens at the browser's end. Okay, so front end gives us an idea of what happens at the browser's end and thereby giving a certain idea on the presentation of the application. Next, if I talk about backend, backend gives us the idea of what happens at the server side, right? Apart from that, we also get an idea of things like how database is like how data is stored in the memory. So things like very basic things like computer organization. So we have memory hierarchy, we have algorithm complexities, we have things like how databases are stored, how an element is sorted from the database, right? If I want to fetch an element, if I want to fetch certain bit of my data, how it is exactly stored in the memory, how exactly it is located from the memory. So things like that are so we give an approach to that part in the backend part. Then comes the validation, where we validate the data that the user enters into the application. So let's say if I have an application that asks for my email and my password. So as you all know, email has a certain structure, right? So to validate that, how an email should look like, is this email entered by the user is correctly entered or not, is this the pattern to be followed while writing an email? All these things are done in validation, right? Next comes very important part, that is security of an application. So I'm creating an application, but I don't want any malicious activities to be done with my application, because my application is linked with database which might have some crucial data about the client or the user. So I want my application to be secure at the most. For that, we'll talk about certain security measures that are taken. We will also talk about certain role-based access control, right? So role-based access control being a very important part of access control in general, right? We'll also talk about things like mandatory access control and discretionary access control. So what are the limitations of each? What are the advantages of each? How is one different from the other? Next comes the application testing, right? So I'm creating an application and I want to test the functionality of application. I also want to test whether the logo that I want in the top left corner of my application, let's say if I want a logo on the top left point of my application, let me test that with non-functional testing, right? So there are certain things which are functional, which I would test if things are happening or not in my application, and there are things that are non-functional. So this which checks which does not affect the functionality as the whole, but it affects the overall look and feel of my application. So all these types of testing will be done in the part where we talk about testing an application. Now there are certain various details of application, how each testing is related to other, but I guess that is not the time for now. We'll look into it in the much later when we talk about exactly in the coming weeks. Next, after this, I would also give a small light on beyond HTML, right? So what comes beyond HTML? I'm creating an application. I've added some design to it. I've added things like I've used frameworks like Flask and Bootstrap, and everything is done. But is that all? Is HTML the only, is the last resort to my application? No, I want to add some dynamicity into the application. How is that done? So that is where JavaScript comes in. So we talk about various things about JavaScript, various like custom elements in HTML, and how JavaScript is able to manipulate these elements in HTML with the help of certain frameworks, right? So we'll give a small light on how JavaScript comes into picture at that point of time. Next comes the deployment of application. Now everything is done. My application is created. It's working fine. I have given topmost security to my application. It looks wonderful. But I want this application to be used by other people, right? I want this application to be used by other clients. So this is where I talk about deployment of an application. So this is where software or frameworks like Heroku comes in or Glitch comes in, right? So we'll talk about the platforms in detail, but in deployment, we'll also talk about things like version control. Now I have created an application, I have deployed it, but one fine day I think that okay, I need to make certain changes in my application, but my application is already deployed and being used by my users, is being used by other users. How do I make those changes? So this is happening. This is happening by the term called version control. So we'll also talk about things like version control, containers, virtual machines, etc. in lot detail in the following weeks. So this is about the course outline of what we are going to see in the course of coming 12 weeks, right? Next, I'll give a small light on weekly assessment. So every week you'll be given certain, so when the content of the week releases, we'll give certain questions. A part of question will be graded, right? So that part of question can be considered or can be considered as a part of evaluation of your final score that might or may not contribute to the final score of your application development one. But the something that contributes definitely are the lab assignments. So we have planned certain lab assignments based on the knowledge of what you have learned from coming weeks, right? So if there is, if you're talking about week one, we'll talk about web and web architectures, and then we talk about HTML, and then we talk about CSS. So we'll have lab assignment based on HTML, CSS to test your knowledge on how you can create static web pages, right? So we are planning to have 5 to 6 lab assignments, and we'll see how many of those can be used for grading. So this is about the weekly assessment of AppDev 1. Yeah, so next comes the AppDev 2, and to give you more details on AppDev 2, I guess I'll call Abhishek on that, right? So Abhishek, would you like to take over?
Yeah, thanks, Adarsh. So firstly, I would like to quickly walk through the course instructors for this Modern Application Development 2 course. So shall I have the next slide, please? Okay. So the first instructor is myself, Abhishek. I have completed my BTech from Kurukshetra University. I have been a part of couple of edtechs before I joined the course support team here. I have completed one run of Modern Application Development 1 course as a course instructor. The second instructor is Narendra Mishra. He has completed his MTech from IIT Madras. He has completed his MSc from IIT Kanpur, and he has also been a part of core support team for Modern Application Development 1 course for its first run. There are a set of supporting instructors for this course as well. So the first instructor is Arup sir. So he has completed his MTech from University of Calcutta, and he has again completed one run of DBMS course as a course instructor. And other one is Danya ma'am. So she has completed her PhD from IIT Madras, and she has been a part of course support team for 1.5 years now. Now, for giving you the outline of this course, I would like to request the faculty of this course who has just joined the session. So I would like to request Nitin sir to give a course outline of this Modern Application Development 2 course.
Thanks, Abhishek. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. So good evening, welcome to everyone. I think hopefully many of you who are going to do application development 2, I mean, or not many of you, all of you who are going to do application development 2 must have already done AppDev 1. So hopefully you have an idea of, the rough scheme that we are following over there, right? And AppDev 2 is in some sense taking what you have done in AppDev 1 and trying to take it forward, right? And what do I mean by that? Once again, rather than sort of focusing on any given framework or a specific type of technology, what we are trying to do over here is, as far as possible, look at specific concepts that are useful in terms of building up more sort of advanced applications. So first questions, and the first question that we can ask is, what exactly do we mean by an advanced application? And what we have decided over here, Tejesh and I, Tejesh will also be co-teaching this with me, just like for AppDev 1. We had this discussion, and primarily what we have decided that we are going to focus on is the front end, okay, to the large part, at least in the beginning. And what that means is, a web application by itself, requires a lot of HTML. There are a number of HTTP links. You click on them, you go from one page to another, you navigate. Yes, you can build up fairly good applications in that way. But a sort of good user experience and a fluid interface with the application requires a little bit more. And one way by which that can be achieved is through the use of JavaScript on the front end. Okay, so primarily AppDev 2 is going to use that approach. We will use JavaScript. We will basically start off with a much more deep dive into JavaScript. Okay, essentially going into some of the concepts of what it allows us to do, and also what are its constraints, which basically came about from the development of the language in the first place. After that, what we are going to do is we'll be picking up one framework, right? Trying to make it as neutral as possible, just like we use Flask and Python in AppDev 1. We are going to introduce Vue.js in AppDev 2. And the reason is not because this is the best framework or it has like superior features to everything else. It's a good balance between features and simplicity, right? And for us, the simplicity is very important because it allows us to focus on concepts. So like the outline over here says, essentially what we are going to be looking at is advanced front-end development, introducing this concept of what is called the jam stack, right? I mean, essentially JavaScript, APIs, and markup. Markup was already done in AppDev 1. APIs was done in AppDev 1. JavaScript was touched upon. Now we are going to sort of do a lot more of JavaScript, put all of them together, and see how we can have that whole idea, the separation of concerns, right? There is a backend that takes care of APIs and the business logic. There is a front end which using markup is able to display things on a screen. And there is the JavaScript that ties the two together and allows interactivity. Okay, so that's sort of the way that we are looking at building up applications. Now, that will be a significant part of AppDev 2. But in addition to that, there are a lot of other sort of ideas that come into the picture. Including things like asynchronous jobs. There are things which, if you try doing them right as part of the main code itself, they can just essentially kill your application performance. How do you handle those? It could be something like sending email or fetching data from another over the network, things of that sort. There is also the whole idea of progressive web apps, and we are going to basically be looking at this as one step towards mobile application development, right? So we will be looking at mobile application development, but primarily from the same viewpoint, right? How do we do APIs, markup, and JavaScript for the front end? Of course, there are other technologies that can be used in order to implement something similar, but we are not really going into depth on those. Okay. And last but not least, there is definitely one of the things that you need to understand well when you're looking at more advanced applications is performance measurement. How do I know whether my application is good enough or fast enough for the kind of use case that I'm seeing? And more importantly, how do I measure it and how do I improve upon it? Okay, so these are the set of topics that we will be covering in AppDev 1. There are potentially one or two other topics which, depending on the schedule and how things work out, they could be brought in, but this is the main focus of the course itself. So yeah, I think that's basically the summary from my side. Over to you, Abhishek.
Yeah, thank you, Nitin sir. So I would also like to request Thejiyen sir if he wants to add anything in the course outline for application development 2 course.
I don't think there's anything to add. I think Nitin has covered almost everything. Yeah, we can just continue.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so Adarsh, shall I have the next slide, please? Okay, so as far as the assessments are concerned for this modern application development 2 course, they are going to be very much similar as what other courses are following. You will be given some graded questions that may or may not contribute to your final score, as Adarsh has already mentioned. You are required to submit those assignments within the given deadline. We have also planned some programming assignments, the details of which will be shared later on. And also, they are decided as tentative as now. So we'll be giving you more details going forward. So shall I have the next slide, please? Okay, so the quiz and the EndSem component for both courses, Modern Application Development 1 and 2, are quite similar. So for shedding some light on it, I would like to request Sonal. So over to you, Sonal.
Thank you, Abhishek. So can I have the slides? Okay, so as you already familiar with the concepts and the course outline and the weekly assignments of both MAD 1 and MAD 2. So now let's talk about the component that is common to both of these courses, that is quiz 1, quiz and EndSim. So in this slide, we will be giving you a quick walkthrough upon the exam pattern that we had this time. So first thing to note here is that this time we'll have in total of 2 quizzes and 1 end-term exam. This time also we will have certain components with us to test and evaluate these students on the basis of what they had and how they are good in the problem solving skills and concepts regarding the course. So our first point is the objective questions in person at exam center, and second is the subjective question in person at exam center. So these questions are nothing but the quiz. So uh, apart from the quiz, we have also an SEM exam at the end of the course. So all these exams are have to be held at some exam centers through online mode. So at last, if we have in-person viva through Google Meet. So this viva will be held through Google Meet. This will also held at somewhere at the end of the course before the end term exam. So yeah, at last, the weightage for each of the component that I listed above is will be made available in the course webpage, so student can easily go there and see their weightage for each component. Can I have the next slide? Okay, so apart from the previous slides, this slide is all about the expectation that uh, we are expecting from the students. So in each week we have in total 2 to 3 hours of lecture content. Expecting student effort, minimum of 10 hours or 50. So for each of the courses, two courses are advisable. So after student basically have 2 courses advisable, more courses will be open with that also. If you're okay with it, that will be good. So but we all strictly advise you to take courses. One important thing is the discussion. Your instructor, all this thing you can do in order to actively participate. And yeah, so we are expecting constructive inputs via discussion from forum by the students also. So all along, please maintain decorum in the discussion forum and live session. So always so at last, we are expecting the cooperation with the instructor team to bring the best out of the everyone and enhance the quality of program. So these are the expectation that we had from the students. So now this is all about this slide. Now to give the overview on system commands, I will like to hand it over to Ankur sir.
Thanks, Sonal. Good evening, everybody. So I will share details about the system command course. Next slide, please. So firstly, yeah, our course faculty is Dr. Gandham Fani Kumar. He is a professor in the Department of Metallurgical and Materials Engineering. He has completed his PhD and BTech both from IIT Madras, and he is very enthusiastic about Linux. He has taken similar courses for NPTEL and even at the campus, IIT Madras. Now, about our course instructors. Next slide, please. So, we have 2 core instructors and we have a few supporting instructors as well. So I am Ankur Parmar. I have done my masters from IIT Bombay, and I have been associated with this online degree program since last 3 months. Before that, I was working as a development engineer at Microsoft in Search Technology Group. And then we have Santhana Krishnan. He has completed his master's from Anna University, and he has been associated with this program since January 2021. Then we have a few supporting instructors working part-time with us. First is Hariharan VS, and he is pursuing his PhD at IIT Madras. Second is Shreya Smita. She is also pursuing BTech at IIT Madras, and Archesh also pursuing BTech at IIT Madras. Next slide, please. So firstly, I want to talk something about if you guys would be wondering about why should we learn Linux, why should we learn command line. So rather than sharing my opinion, I would happily share the statistics that are gathered from all over internet. Now, firstly, Linux kernel powers many devices. Many means majorly or majority of devices on this globe. So if you talk about embedded devices, mobile devices, personal computers, all of these devices are most of these devices are directly or indirectly powered by Linux or Linux kernel. Now, so if you talk about Android, the majorly used OS for mobile devices, that is built on Linux kernel. Then in personal computer space, Mac, which is built on Linux kernel. And the commands that you can use on Mac and Linux are very, very similar. So now this was the client side. Now if you talk about server side, so in server side, majority of web servers, majority of cloud infrastructure, and almost all supercomputers uses Linux. So even you would be surprised to know that Microsoft uses it to run some of its operations. And among all of these Linux distributions, Ubuntu is the most used one. And so now Microsoft has released WSL2, Windows subsystem for Linux, which can run full version of Linux. And so if we talk about personal computers, desktop and laptop, almost all the computers can run Linux in, almost all OS can run Linux commands in some way or the other. And if we talk about the industry, so there are a lot of jobs that require expertise in Linux CLI and utilities. Example are system and network administrator jobs, DevOps jobs, then system software engineering jobs, etc. Next slide, please. Now, why so much emphasis on command line is because this is what makes you fast. This is what separates, this is what makes you efficient, and it separates amateur programmers from expert programmers. So if you talk about an example, so you can chain commands in Linux and can achieve complex tasks easily. So if you, for an example, if you want to archive all the files on a computer that are an year old and also those are greater than 100 MB. Now, if you want to do it through GUI, either you have to manually search for all the files, then sort the files, then select the files specific to your need, and then archive them. The other option in GUI could be if there is an app available, either you build an app or you buy an app, or if there is an app available, but the functionality in that would be limited. Now, the other option that we would be learning here, the CLI. You can just write a small script, like it won't even pass hundreds of lines. It would be small script, and that can achieve this easily. And if you want to, instead of archiving, if you want to achieve something else, just tweak the script and you can achieve that. So this is what you will get, and you will be able to do after this course. Okay, now let's talk about the course outline. So this course is a 8-week course, and how the syllabus is distributed among these weeks, let's go ahead. So in week 1, you will be introduced to Linux and like how it was developed and some history about Linux. Then you will be learning how command line environment works. Then some commands to fetch the hardware and software details of your machine, and input and output redirection to files. In second week, you will be learning about managing packages and repositories. Packages you can think of as programs that you, the softwares that you run on your Windows machines. Then you will learn about types of files, their permissions and their access modes, and managing these permissions and access modes. Then you will learn about environment variables and how they can be used. In week 3, you will be learning about shell variables, prompt strings, and symbolic links of files. Then you will be exploring root file system and how to manage the file system, commands related to those. Then commands related to slicing output. Then managing running programs. So similar to what you do with task manager, with more power to you, you can do that with command line. In week 4, you will learn to use pipes to concatenate commands and create your own commands and create complex commands also. Then you will learn to use regex patterns and egrep to extract information from text. Then you will learn about some command line editors. So these are similar to text editors. One example is Notepad. So whatever we have available command line editors, you will learn about that. Then we will start some shell scripting in week 4 itself, but it will be just the introduction. Next slide, please. In week 5, you will be learning complete shell programming, where you would be able to, after week 5, you will be able to write complex shell programs, bash scripts. And in week 6, you will be introduced to 2 more text processing utilities, awk and sed. So these are not simple utilities. You can even write scripts in awk and sed for your text processing needs, for extracting useful information from the text. In week 7, you will be introduced to make utility. So this is used for conditional compilation and resolving the dependencies in big projects where there are multiple files and there are multiple dependencies between them. Then you will learn about file packaging utilities. Example, if you are aware of zip and rar, so there are many more. Then you will be introduced to networking concepts. Not just that, you will learn commands to analyze the networking traffic on your machine and play around with it, and also analyze the logs. In week 8, you will be introduced to RAID. So this is used for hardware failures, for managing storage failures. And you will also be introduced to version control systems, and what the version control system that we'll use for learning will be Git. There are many other version control systems, but Git is widely used, and we'll use the same thing. So this is also used by teams for working on projects where the repositories are shared, where the content is shared, and so Git is useful for working on those projects. So this is the syllabus. Now next slide, please. So about the weekly assessments, it is similar to other courses. So we'll have objective type assignments, and we'll have programming lab assignments also. But there maybe in some labs we may not have lab assignments, but we'll try to have in all the weeks. Now let's see the grading pattern. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the grading pattern. So we just now discussed about weekly assignments. So there will be 8 weekly assignments, out of which we will take the average of best 5, and the score should be greater than 40% for you to be eligible to attend the end term exam. Okay, so this you guys would be aware that the mode will be on portal itself. Every week the assignments will be available and you can submit it there itself. And this time, this weekly assessments will have a weightage in the final grading also, and that will be 10%. Okay. Now after that, we will have 2 quizzes in the middle of the coursework. So the quiz 1 will have weightage of 15%, quiz 2 will have a weightage of 20%. Attending at least one of these 2 quizzes is mandatory for you to be eligible to attend the end term exam. And if you miss any one of the quizzes, you will be eligible, but there will be a penalty of 5%, and your grading would be considered from 95 only. And the remaining 10% would be distributed between end term and programming exam. Then after that, in the end term, there will be a objective type end term exam that you will have to attend in person at exam centers, similar to quiz 1 and quiz 2. The weightage will be 30%. Then there will be a proctored programming exam, and the weightage will be 25%. And you will be given 2 chances. 2 slots will be available to you. You can choose one of them, so that if you are unavailable on any one of the slots, you can opt for the other one. That's why we are going ahead with 2 proctored exams, but only one needs to be attended. So that's about the grading pattern. Now next slide, please. Okay, so now the expectations from you guys is the same that Sonal was discussing, that you have to be active, you should be active on forum, and in a case of any doubts or anything, feel free to come on forum and discuss. So now I will go back to Adarsh to discuss further.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yeah, so here I'll talk about the support that the course instructors would provide you throughout the course and some of the system requirements. All right, so this is for all MAD 1, MAD 2, and system commands. So so wherein we talk about support from the course instructors, what you expect from us is you can have what you'll have from us is you'll have 2 to 3 weekly live sessions where we plan to have sessions on activity questions and practice questions. So there are 2 categories of questions which will be given to you with the content of each week. So you're supposed to solve these questions, and then we can discuss the doubts and all your queries in this session that is particularly confined to activity and practice session. One of the session would be related to the practical part, that is the solve with instructor session. So what we'll do here is we'll try to give a small assignment kind of thing where wherein you have to read out the instructions given in the page itself, and then try to create an application or whatever is asked within that given 2 hours. All right, so that is not something that you will have to do by your own. That will be done by us, and then you can simply follow and simply ask if there is anything that is not getting followed by you. We will also have open sessions which are like a bit flexible in terms of content of week, because we would like to discuss queries on not only that particular week but the previous weeks which have always been already been released. So we'll try to discuss queries from the entire part that is covered up to that week. As far as the queries are concerned, we can also have faculties joining during this session. So whenever a faculty is available to join, you will be notified as and when. All right. Next comes the discourse discussion. So we have an open discussion platform called Discourse, where what we do is we ask students to put their queries, and you can get the resolved answer for that query within 24 hours. So this is not only where you ask queries and get your answers answered, but also you can contribute at this platform to the other learners. So if you are confident with one topic and you see a query about a learner on that same topic, you can definitely go ahead and contribute on this discussion. So this is not only something that you receive, it is a kind of two-way communication where you give and take some information. So handling or being active on Discourse will generally be very beneficial for you. We will also plan to have some additional tutorials as and when needed. Why is that? So when we go through a certain part of the course, there are some things that are not covered as the part of course. So there are something that is prerequisite or something that you might need to learn from outside. So to take care of that part, we'll provide certain additional tutorials. Now this is we have created course so as to so as you have minimal requirement for the additional tutorials, but whenever there is a requirement, we'll try to give one. Next is very important part, that is mock exams. So these mock exams are designed for you to like before every quiz, right? So that you get an idea of what is the difficulty level of the question, what are the type of questions that one can come up with, what are the topics that needs to be emphasized on. So all these things you will give an idea on to you with, you'll get an idea with the help of mock exams, right? So just as a preparation part of your quiz. So this is this kind of support that you can expect from the course instructors. Next, we'll talk about certain system requirements, but for that I'll call Ankur sir again. Sir, can you please take this?
Yeah, thanks again, Adarsh. So now I will tell you the recommended software and hardware requirements here, but these are not very strong requirements or strict requirements. This will having these will definitely add in your learning, and but if you don't possess this does not mean that it will block you from scoring good or excelling in the course. Uh, if you are running Windows 10, so you would have to run Linux over it, either using WSL or virtual machine. Then it's recommended that you should have at least 8 GB of RAM, and you should also have a mobile phone with good camera for online proctored exams. And you will need a fully functional headphone or an earphone, a microphone, and a webcam. So this will be required for Viva and proctored exam as well. And in terms of software requirement, you can it's okay, you can be running Windows 10 or and Linux Ubuntu 18.04 or higher. Like in Linux, if you are running other versions, like it's not a big problem, but for some commands, the like packaging commands and these commands are different on different Linux distributions, so that can be a problem. Otherwise it won't be a very big problem. And if you are running if you are having Mac OS, there also you can practice the assignments of system commands easily. Then you should have a Chrome browser and a Google account as well. Now you should have good working knowledge of Replit, that guys who have been taking other courses would already have been using Replit and would be well versed with the environment there. And good internet connection is also a must. Now so this is it, and we will go about to take the questions now. Now over to Adarsh again.
Okay, so Narendra, can you just read out the questions for us, please?
Yeah, sure. So the first question is time constraints and difficulty level of each of the courses.
Okay, so I guess as far as the time is concerned for each of the course, they are quite comparable. As I guess Sonal has already mentioned, that we expect you to dedicate 10 to 15 hours apart from the lecture content that will be given for each week. And of course, this can be the time required can be more in case you are finding a particular week difficult. But yeah, the difficulties level are comparable for each of the courses.
Okay, Ankur, would you like to answer this question?
Okay, so to add to this, for system commands course, like if you see all the lectures timely and you practice all the assignments, you won't need any extra time, and you don't need to donate a lot of time other than that, if you do all the things available to you on the portal. So that should be sufficient. And difficulty level, I don't think it's a very difficult course, so you can be rest assured for that.
Okay, so the next question is, what is modern application development 1 and 2? So I guess we have already discussed it.
Yeah, I guess this has already been discussed with the help of slides.
Okay, the next question is, do I have to install Linux on my system for the course? If yes, which which distro type, like Ubuntu, Red Hat, or something else? Please tell us, and thank you in advance. I guess we have already answered this question. So for the MAD one, would you like to answer this, Abhishek? For the MAD one, we don't need MAD one, or MAD 2, we don't need Ubuntu.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not required. We are okay with Windows as well.
Yeah. And for the system command, Ankur.
Okay, I will reiterate on the same thing. Like you can install Ubuntu as a second OS on your machine. That would be useful for you also. After you learn this course, you may find yourself using Linux more than Windows after that. So that is one thing. But if you don't want to install that, if you can't install that, that's not an issue. You can very well install WSL2 on Windows and work. So that should not be a problem.
So the next question is, how difficult are MAD, AppDev1 and MOD, AppDev1 and Java compared to PDSA and DBMS? Should I take them together?
Okay, I guess this question has already been answered. The difficulty level I have already told that they are very much comparable with each other. Now, in case you want to decide which choices you should go for, so we have some dedicated sessions planned next week, especially for this purpose. So we would highly recommend you to attend those sessions and get your queries clarified there.
So the next question is, can we take modern application development 1 in the same term as DBMS course? So, yeah, yes, you can. It's co-requisite, not the prerequisite.
Yeah, so as I mentioned while talking about the course outline, right? So we'll talk about the database part much when we are connecting with the application, right? So having a knowledge of DBMS is good. And that's why we have mentioned it as a core requisite. So going through DBMS and AppDev1 should be, helpful in getting the ideas of model part, specifically in AppDev1 or modern application development 1.
Okay, the next question is DBMS prerequisite or co-requisite for MAD1? So it's co-requisite. The answer, it has been answered. And the next question is, I have laptop with 4 GB RAM, i3. Will this able to handle the system commands and AppDev2 course? So this question we have already discussed. So you can install the WSL. So, Ankur, you want to comment on this question?
Yes, you are correct. Either you can, if WSL runs smoothly, it's okay. If it doesn't, then you can install a second OS on your machine, and you will find a lot of guides to do that on internet. But even if you want to initially, for some time, you want to practice some assignments, that can be done on Replit also. So there won't be any bottleneck as per if you don't install the second Linux as a second OS on your machine. Yeah, next question, please, Narendra.
So purchasing a PC with i3 Ryzen 3 processor is okay, or should I go for i5 Ryzen 5? So I guess i3 is okay.
So Ankur sir, would you like to elaborate more on this question?
Most is okay. But if you can get an i5 with the or Ryzen 5 series, it's much better. But I think if you're not doing anything, just doing one thing at any point, i3 also should. I mean, if you can afford, go for i5. Otherwise, you can still continue with i3, add more RAM, and probably like convert to an SSD.
So the next question is, will the number of weeks be less for the course compared to the other courses, as the credit for this course is less? System command. So I guess there are only 8 weeks.
Yeah, this has been already answered in the presentation. So there are only 8 weeks. Next question.
Are we going to have some insight about building mobile phone apps? So this question is for Matt too.
Okay. I guess Nitin sir has already given some insights about this in the course outline that he has given for modern application development too. We will be touching upon some mobile development, but we won't be using any specific framework for it, as the focus will remain on the web application.
What will be the first 4 or 3 best courses names in all diploma courses to start diploma for non-technical students? I am a BSc Physics honors student. My target is to complete this. So he's asking about the first 4 or 3 best courses he should take.
So yeah, I guess we have already answered this, that we are planning some dedicated sessions especially for this purpose next week. So we would suggest you to watch or join those sessions.
Yeah, and the similar question is, the next question is also similar. I'm third year BTech student from ECE branch. Could you suggest how many subjects should I take in the first term of the diploma?
Yeah, so the answer remains the same. We can go on to the next question.
How many quizzes will be organized for this course? And do we have any project for this course? It's for modern application development too.
Okay, so there are basically 3 quizzes and 1 end-sem exam planned for this course, and yes, definitely there will be a project as well, which will be evaluated through Viva, in-person Viva. That will be conducted through Google Meet. Okay.
Okay, the next question is, will there be any capstone project?
Sorry to interrupt, but 2 quizzes and 1 end term, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the next question is, will there be any capstone project for modern application development 1? So yes, the answer is yes. Can I use Mac terminal for this course, or I have to get Linux terminal? This is for system commands. Ankur, would you like to answer this question?
Actually, can you repeat the question? I didn't get it.
I'll repeat it. Can I use Mac terminal for this course, or I have
Yes.
to get Linux terminal?
Yeah. So you guys can use the Mac terminal also, and we will try our best that none of the assignments don't work on Mac. It's not like that. There are some commands are not different, but for some system related commands like ps and other commands, the output could be different on Ubuntu and Mac. So that we are aware of, and we'll try to take care of that in our designing our assignments.
So the next
But
question
just sorry, just to add more thing, but the recommendation is that you should use Ubuntu. That is what we want to learn in this course.
Okay. So the next question is, will we be touching upon concepts of web engineering such as DevOps and CI/CD pipelines?
Is this for AppDev 2 or 1?
AppDev 2.
Okay, I guess a little portion of it has already been given in the application development 1 course. But Thejiyen sir, would you like to comment on this question? Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, there were webhooks, and what was the second one?
CI/CD pipelines.
I don't think we'll be covering any part of CI/CD pipeline because it's mostly like a DevOps related one more than application development. In terms of webhooks, yeah, we might cover a little bit of it as part of asynchronous programming. It's not like a separate chapter, but it will be covered as part of handling incoming web.
Okay, thank you, sir.
The next,
Narendra, shall we have the next question, please?
yeah. So the next question is there any capstone project? Yeah, this already we have answered this question. The next question when the interim exam will be held for system command after 8 weeks or 12 weeks starting from Jan 22.
Okay.
Ankur?
So the exam will take place along with other subjects, and so although the course is 8 weeks, the exam will be after 12 weeks only. Yeah. Then the next question.
Yeah. So the next question is for the system command again. Since it is a 8-week course, so the interim happens before the other subject. And the second question, all the things that we need to install, download will be given proper. I mean, the first part of the question has already been answered. And the
Yes.
second question is, the second part is not complete. So you can
So
skip the
second
question.
part, I am assuming it is related to the software installation. So that will be covered in the first week. Sir has like discussed in his videos, like what are your options and how you can install the required packages and softwares on Windows also. Yeah,
Okay.
Narendra, next question.
So, so we have covered all the questions. So that's it.
Okay. Okay. So thank you, Narendra, very much for reading up the question for us. So if there are no more questions, I guess it's the good time to close this session then. So I would like to thank you all for joining with us for this orientation session of the 3 courses. And we are looking forward to interact with you all when the courses will get started. So thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining.